Well, hello there, HW here, and thank you so much for watching Tone Junkie TV. Let's talk about the pre and post positions of the EQ on the Kemper, shall we? Well, first of all, what is it? All right, let's jump in. Obviously, this is the Kemper signal chain. We have input, we have the ABCD, our 4-stomp section. Then we get amplifier, EQ, cabinet. We got our 4 effects and the output. The Kemper does not allow us to really change the order of that EQ. It's pretty much set in stone for us. Unlike the Axe effects or the Helix, we don't have just an open map where we can drag anything around, create sort of any signal chain we can think up. But the Kemper does give us the option to move the EQ section in front of the amplifier or leave it after the amplifier section, always before the cabinet. But do you want to put the EQ before or after the amplifier section? That is an option the Kemper does give us. Let's talk about why. Kemper says in the manual that basically if you're playing a modern amplifier, or think anything 1980s or sort of later, that would be a modern design, those amps typically, think Marshall DSL, think Diesel Herbert, think Mesa Boogie Dual Rec, any of those amps that would get a lot of preamp gain. The gain would originate and be created in the preamp. You'd be dealing with an EQ section or a tone stack in that amp that would actually be coming after the stage of the amplifier, creating a lot of the gain. So you can imagine how that might affect the sound. If you contrast that to a vintage style amplifier like a Twin or a Deluxe, even an AC30 to some degree, if it's a non-master AC30, you'd be getting a lot of your breakup from the power section of that amplifier. And so the tone section, the EQ section or the tone stack in the amplifier would be coming before the components in the amplifier that would be creating the breakup. So to emulate that, Kemper has given us the ability to put the EQ pre or post. Let's talk about the pros and cons of each. And let me give you an example. I am playing the Bend Sun Chimer 2 profile. You can get that at tonejunkiestore.com. It's in a very popular Bend Sun pack. Let's jump in. I am playing a PRS Ted McCarty SC245. So it's very Les Paul-like, mahogany body, maple top. And these are some PRS 5708 pickups. So supposedly very accurate recreations of a Gibson PAF pickup. Now I'm going to put us on the neck humbucker here, and this is the tone that you would get out of the box. Let's check that out. Okay, not a bad tone at all. Warm, definitely. And what else would you expect out of a neck humbucker in a Les Paul guitar like this? But what if we don't want that? What if we want a little more snap, a little more sizzle? I often will switch between P90s, single coils, humbuckers, just sort of day to day, week to week. And I often find myself moving to the humbucker guitars and really enjoying the mid-range they add, but sometimes wishing I could get a little more sparkle and I could get a little more of the scooped mid-range and some high-end for those really delicious sort of American clean sounds that sort of harken back to an F-style guitar. So how do we do that? Well, come over here to the EQ section of the Kemper. Okay, now down here, we always have a view of the EQ section. It's always active in these knobs down here. But if we hold down the EQ knob, we begin to see a visual representation here of what's going on down on these knobs on the screen. So one option we get is this pre and post position button. Okay, so before we even touch the pre or the post switch on the EQ, let me give one tip here. I find, and I know this is true in the profiles I create, and I find them true for Michael Britt, I find them true for some other profiles that are coming out there right now. You don't always have to increase the treble and the presence to make the guitar brighter. And what I mean by that is I would suggest first starting always by rolling back a little bit of bass and seeing where that gets you. Now, if that gets you to a place where the guitar seems brighter, fabulous. If you're playing a humbucker guitar, I would also suggest that you try rolling back a little bit of that mid-range. So let me show you how that affects the tone. I'm going to defeat the EQ section for 1 minute here. And I'm going to show you that original tone again. Check it out. that EQ and I've cut the bass and the mid-range. I don't know about you, but to me, that initially sounds brighter. I couldn't necessarily pick out, well, that sound has less bass or less mid-range. To me, it just sounds a little more bright. And pulling back the mids a lot of times do that, especially with a humbucker guitar. There's so much mid-range character there that you can pull back those mids and you can actually seemingly brighten up the pickup just by creating some space by pulling that mid-range out. Okay, now from here, let's say we do want a little more high-end. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to roll the treble and the presence just up a little bit. And for a neck humbucker, this is going to sound quite sort of American clean. I'm even going to push the mid-range back a little bit more. Check this out. You know, we're definitely moving away from that darker neck setting, and you know, here, let's take the EQ section out again for comparison. Here's the EQ defeated. Here is no EQ changes to the profile, just as it comes out. Now with the changes we've made. Now, it's important to note that what we're doing is we're taking the EQ kind of curve and the character that's coming out of the guitar, and we're sending it into the amplifier section of the profile. Now, largely, that's a big part of the profile. The cab section is important, of course, but we're getting all of our breakup character there in the amplifier section. So we're dealing with an EQ that's coming after that right now. This is one way to do it, but of course this video is about pressing this little button and putting it on pre. Why don't you take a listen and see what you think. It's different. Let's hear it again. This is post, kind of the normal position. Pre. Post. Pre. I could even pull that mid-range back a little more, and we really start to get a much more scoop sound, getting into P90, almost trying to emulate a single coil kind of territory. Pre. So what I really hear is the difference between post and pre is that, to me, pre seems to edit the sound of the guitar more than the sound of the profile. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times we say, well, how do I match the profile to any guitar? And that's one way to go about it. How would we edit a profile to match the guitar? Well, probably, like I've shown in other videos, thoughts on Kemper EQ, which you can look back on the channel, I say start with the amplifier section and start with the definition control. But in this video, I'm giving you another option here. What if we match the guitar to suit the profile a little better? And so what I mean is, by taking that EQ and putting it before the amplifier, it's almost like putting in an EQ block between D and amplifier. It's almost like taking this Boss GE7 and putting it in front of the input of a tube amp. Now, I did that for years, and one thing I discovered that I really like to do was, if I had hot pickups or just PAF style pickups, I could pull out some of the mid-range and sometimes boost some of the highs, and it would almost clean up my guitar. It would give me like a P90 or like a hot single coil sound, and I would actually set my amplifier up for overdrive, and then I would kick that on, and it would, and with a little reduced level, it would actually clean up my amp and give me less mid-range, and I would actually turn this pedal on to get my clean sound. Rather than having a clean sound and adding pedals on top, I had a dirty sound and was using this in sort of the way that you might see an underdrive used. Some pedals are called underdrives as a contrast to overdrives, and they actually sort of reduce the gain. Really, they're pulling back the mid-range. The EQ in the Kemper, in the pre-position, sort of lets us do that. And if you listen here again, it sounds to me like I'm actually changing the pickups in my guitar rather than changing the profile itself. Let's listen back to the post sound, kind of sort of the default out-of-the-box sound with these EQs. So the EQ is set post-amplifier. Okay, now, to me, you hear all of that breakup and really notice that breakup character and the amount of bass that's in that signal. Now, compare that to moving that EQ up pre, and think of it as we're changing the pickups in this guitar. To me, it sounds like I'm changing the pickups in the sense that I'm lowering their output, I'm lowering the mid-range, and I'm sending that into the Kemper. Now, does it sound like a Les Paul still? Well, I think it sounds like a good Les Paul to me in the neck anyway. And it might be that you might have a Kemper profile set to the remote, or you might, if you use the remote, or you might just set the amp up this way, or have an EQ that you can pull in if you're going to pull out a guitar like this. Now, what does it do to the bridge? It makes it a little hairy, a little bright. There, I like this post position more than the pre position. What we're doing is we're removing mid-range. We're adding highs, but we're doing it before the amplifier. So the amplifier section. So what the Kemper is seeing is really a different input signal. It doesn't know if you're playing a Strat. It doesn't know if you're playing a Les Paul or a PRS. All it knows is what it's hearing. And so if you take a guitar like this and you try to make it sound more like a guitar that I've got on the wall back here, the Kemper is gonna behave as it should. And so that is my suggestion for the day, pre and post EQ. It is really the ability to stop editing the profile and start editing the guitar. Isn't Kemper amazing? It really is. Hey, if you like this video, please subscribe and give me a like. And hey, thank you so much for watching Tone Junkie TV. I'm going to have more of these Kemper videos and Kemper tips, how I'm using the Kemper, coming up shortly. All right, thank you so much. HW, out.